As I've probably changed the title dozens of times, I'm not sure what I ended up with exactly. But it should be something along the lines of Imperial Order is a bad card. And I don't mean bad in the sense of being poorly designed. I mean bad in the sense of being weak and not deserving the ban hammer. Easy now. Lower those pitchforks. Let me explain. First, let's address the elephant in the room. Some, or even many of you, might be asking, is this rando really saying that a toxic floodgate trap card didn't deserve to be banned? I personally don't find any card inherently toxic or unfun. I've had my fair share of Mystic Mine encounters while it was still legal, and I was certainly annoyed by it, but I never once thought, that needs to be banned. Although I could understand the reasoning behind banning a card perceived as unhealthy for the game by the general player base. And if that's the reason Konami decided to ban the card, then I guess that's fine-ish. But I'm not writing this to talk about cards being banned for not being fun to play against, or for being unsportsmanlike, like Victory Dragon, per se, or the Exodia pieces being limited for lore reasons. Those are completely separate topics, although you might argue that a card being toxic or unfun to play against is probably overpowered. That is so not the case here. And for that I present you, Imperial Order. I believe a card can be labeled as unfun or bad for the game, and yet still not be very good, or at the very least, not ban-worthy. Just take a look at Rivalry of Warlords, Goes in Match, There Can Be Only One, and even Skill Drain. Those are all cards that people may consider toxic or unfun, but, with the exception of Skill Drain, none of them have ever been on the ban list. And neither I nor anyone I've talked to has considered them ban-worthy. For that matter, Skill Drain is now at 3 and sees virtually no play. Most recently, 2 Floodgate cards came off the list, Macrocosmos and Dimensional Fissure, both now at 3. These are also cards that many would label unfun or toxic to play against, yet Konami has decided they're not strong enough to be on the list. And yeah, I hear you typing, Co-Money is an incompetent organization made up of buffoons that have no idea how game balance works. There might be just a tiny bit of truth in that, but they are certainly not as incompetent as they might seem. They do make mistakes, don't get me wrong, but you have to give them some credit. Managing a game with over 11,000 cards isn't easy. League of Legends has around 140 champions, and even that's been described as a total nightmare to balance by the dev team. So what Konami is doing isn't as easy as it might look. Anyways, corporate talk aside, it is possible for a card to be viewed as unhealthy by the community, yet still not be very good in competitive play. I vaguely remember a Shooting Quasar Dragon article I read the night I was traveling to YCS Dortmund. The writer endorsed the idea of giving competitive players buys so they could dodge the casual dice roll Quasar combo strategies in the first 2 rounds. These decks, revolving around Quasar, are extremely inconsistent, highly interruptible, and heavily reliant on winning the die roll and opening the combo. Quasar is such a behemoth that if it does come out, you almost instantly win. So the writer suggested that instead of Konami banning Quasar and ruining a fun casual deck, they should just give round 1 and round 2 buys more often to top players so they avoid these slot machines. Same applies to Imperial Order. It was highly inconsistent, being at 1, relied on you winning the die roll to set it up, only worked against certain decks, and even stopped you from playing spells. So if you had no plays to begin with and had to flip order for defense, now you have to deal with it too. I think highly inconsistent speaks for itself, so I won't address that any further. Winning the die roll. Well, the format that the card was played in, that I remember, was Tri-Brigade and Sword Soul. The card was mainly main-decked in Sword Soul and sometimes mained in Bird Up, but more often sided in for going first. So let's talk about main decking first. Quite frankly, if you go second versus. Sword Soul while playing birds, and you opened Order in your starting hand. Not only is the card not helping you break the board or bait interruptions, but it's also completely unplayable on your turn. Its only use would be as defense if you manage to break the whole board with one less card in your hand. Not to mention Sword Soul didn't play that many spells to begin with, so the card wasn't even that effective against the deck. It only worked some of the time. Let's imagine a perfect world where you're the luckiest person alive. You win the die roll and draw the one of Imperial Order going first. You wouldn't necessarily be more favored to win because of drawing Order, but mostly because of winning the die roll. That's what I'm addressing. If you win the die roll and draw the unsearchable one of Imperial Order, do you win the game on the spot? Of course not. You'd still need your engine to play the rest of your hand. Let's do some light math. You win the die roll 50% of the time. You draw Order going first in a 40-card deck approximately 12.5% of the time. That means you have a 6.25% chance of that specific situation happening. But wait, it gets worse. You'd also need to open a playable 4-card hand. I won't get into the math there, but we can all agree that the percentage would drop even lower than 6.25%. Being generous and assuming you're playing an extremely consistent deck, let's round it to a 5.75% chance of success. Given a 90% chance of opening a playable hand, which is honestly very high. Oh boy, it gets even better. Not only do you have to win the 5.75% lottery, but the card also needs to be applicable against your opponent's deck. And I hear you typing again. Every deck needs spells to play. To that, I say, if you open Order against Tearlament's Ishizu right now, it's probably just a worse MST against the field spell. And I hear you again. Oh, you're cherry-picking. It's insane versus Fluwanderies. To that, I'd show a pie chart on screen from YCS, Dortmund, Utrecht, and others. But for the sake of argument, let's assume Flunder was as popular as Tear in Top Cut, a clean 50-50 split. Now you might see where I'm going with this. That would mean that if you main-decked Imperial Order and sat at the table, you'd have a 2.87% chance of the card actually being good, and a 5.75% chance of even using the card. And that's not even considering the 50% chance of losing the die roll, meaning the card never comes up. Or worse, a 6.75% chance of you losing the die roll and drawing the card, making it completely useless. We skipped the explanation about the card not being main-decked, but side-decked, and that's because that's exactly what I believe Imperial Order was. A side-deck card at best, mistakenly mained and banned, not for its strength, but because of the collective hate the community has for the card and its RNG nature that hindered consistent top-level play. Similar to shooting Quasar Dragon.